Hi, everybody. Chris Pies here again with another PCA sim racing classroom. This week we are going to be tackling Silverstone in the wet in the GT3R Porsche for Series 13. So
You need to share the screen.
I will show. Good call. Let me share the screen. Share my screen. So we are going to be tackling Silverstone, and we will be tackling it with the Twist of Rain on top of it. So normally Silverstone is pretty. Its sister track is often referred to as COTA, Circuit of the Americas here in the United States. I think they were designed by somebody similar, or I could be making that up completely. But there are a lot of similarities to COTA. And then tackling it in the rain adds a whole nother twist to the track that people may not necessarily be aware of or be ready for. So today's in the classroom, we'll go through the track walk as we normally do, but it will be done in the wet. Now, a couple of just notes to make mention of is there is degrees of wetness for iRacing and in real life. You have lightly damp, and you've got torrential rain that Noah needed an arc to get through, and everywhere in between. And so, what we want to do is we want to understand that what we talk about today is a moderately wet track. It can get wetter if should the weather get to that point, or it could be drier than what I'm talking about today. And depending on the level of moisture on the track will very, very significantly dictate both pace and the line that you run. Hopefully, through my track walk and my explanation of how racing in the rain works, you'll be able to take and figure out the level of grip that the track is willing to offer, adjust your line as appropriate, and be able to find where the grip is, hunt it out, and go as quickly as the track is allowing, whether it be lightly wet or very wet. So that's the goal. I'll show you the rain line because in the session that I ran in, it was, like I said, moderately wet. So there is definitely a rain line that you need to take in these types of conditions. But as the track dries out, you won't have to necessarily take as significant a rain line. So, as before we get started, let's talk about just general dynamics in the rain and how racing in the rain tends to work, and what do I mean by a rain line versus a dry line. So, when you normally drive on a dry track, you have what is considered the racing line, the most optimal line for a specific car on a specific track to both maximize the speed that you can take corners and also to maximize the efficiency of the car and the grip that it has and its advantages and disadvantages. Typically, if we look at just like a standard corner, it's, you're going to, if it's a standard right-hand corner, you're going to put the car all the way on the left side of the track to open the corner up, increase the radius as much as possible. Apex at the right side of the track, right in the middle of the corner, and then track out to the left side of the track on your exit. The reason we do that is because we want to maximize the radius of the corner. The larger the radius of the corner or the circle, the more speed that we can take through the corner. And that's barring other parameters being consistent. That's kind of what we're trying to do. Go through the corners quickly. In the dry, it's fantastic. All or most cars that are racing are driving the same line, which means that as they drive that line, they are putting rubber into the ground or onto the track surface. As tires run over the same line and the same piece of pavement over and over and over again, with significant lateral forces into them, they are depositing rubber. They're losing bits of rubber and putting them down on the track. What this does is this creates a kind of compound on the track where you've got rubber along with whatever tarmac material, whether it be concrete or asphalt, mixed together, and then the tire of the racing car itself, that is the tire that's on the car, likes that a lot, and it's designed to be sticky and grippy on that compound or that mixture of compound between rubber and asphalt, let's say. However, when it starts to rain, what happens is that the natural abrasiveness of the track surface, so the asphalt or the concrete or whatever it is, because it has been run over in the dry so much over time, it gets polished down. And so the abrasiveness of the track tends to go away. The rubber that is deposited on the line becomes slick. And ultimately, what ends up happening is a layer of moisture tends to form on top of the track, which creates kind of a barrier between your tires actually touching the track and not. Hydroplaning is what we call it. So as the track gets wetter and wetter and wetter, the areas of the track that tend to have the least amount of grip are the racing line and low areas of the track, because in addition to the racing line, the lower a portion of the track is, the more that gravity pulls that water into those low areas. If it is an older track, so say Road Atlanta or Road America or something that has a really old surface that's been around for a long time, the loss of grip on the racing line tends to be more severe than if it is a relatively newer track or a better maintained track where they constantly resurface the track. Silverstone falls in the latter category. It is a modern track. F1 races here, they usually race it pretty regularly. There's not a whole lot of low spots in it, so it's pretty much uniform across. So the amount of grip that you will lose online is less severe than, say, at some of those older tracks that I mentioned just previously. So what does this all mean? That's a lot of words. What is the takeaway from this? Ultimately, what it means is that in moderate to severe rain conditions, driving on the racing line will yield less grip in the car, meaning that it should be slower than if you drive off the racing line. So if it gets really wet, our goal is to try to find where there's grip on the track, and that grip will tend to be off the racing line. So we need to do what we can to try to hunt the grip down for the car for when we drive around the track, and it's going to be the inverse of what the normal racing line is. It tends to mean that when you go into corners, that same corner that we talked about before, the right-hander, that's a 90-degree corner, where we would normally be track left on entry for braking, and then entry, apex at the right side of the track, right in the middle of the corner, and then track out to exit all the way on the left again. We want to minimize the time on that line. So what we would do is we would brake offline, so maybe center of track, instead of on the racing line, which would be all the way left track. We'll brake deeper, so we will cross the racing line, but still in a straight line. When we ask the car to do the majority of its turning, we are going to ask it to do it later than we normally would. So we're going to drive in really deep into the corner, slow the car down, and kind of diamond the corner. And then we are going to come out of the corner shallow, so pinch the corner off, drive across the racing line on the way out, but we're going to be driving straight and accelerating in a straight line across the racing line. And we will exit the corner not all the way at the track out point on the left side. So we will be crossing the racing line a couple of times, which means we will be crossing areas of low grip. But if we take them in a straight line, it's not that big a deal if the car hydroplanes or loses grip in a straight line, because you just go straight. It is a big deal if you hit those racing lines at an angle with lateral force in the car, because all of a sudden that will cause the car to either fishtail or understeer, depending on which tire is hitting the racing line. Of course, not every corner is a perfect 90-degree corner or a textbook corner. We've got turns that are complexes. We've got hairpins. We've got sweepers. We've got maggots and Beckett's at Silverstone, which are a high-speed S section. It's impossible to avoid the racing line in situations like that. So in those cases, what we're trying to do is effectively survive. We're trying to find areas of the track that give us grip to go through the corner efficiently and quickly. Now, as I said at the very beginning, rain comes in all shapes and sizes, and the amount of moisture on a track can be variable. You want to find, based on the conditions that you're driving in, where the grip is. And sometimes the grip actually is the racing line, especially if the track isn't all that wet. It's wet enough for wet tires, but it's not wet enough to drive a full wet line. You may actually find that the racing line still has plenty of grip with the wet tires. If that's the case, then run the racing line. You'll probably end up being quicker there. There may be specific corners that you don't want to run the racing line because they're wetter than other portions of the track. All of these things you will be learning through practice, but more specifically also when you drive and you race, because as you race, the moisture on the track is going to be variable as well. More cars on track driving similar lines, all this spray that you see right now coming up from the car, that's has an act of drying the track. So if it's not actively raining but the track is very wet, you put 50 cars out there driving around, after about 30 minutes you're going to see a distinct dry line form. And that dry line is going to offer more grip than anywhere else on the track, even if it may be on the racing line. So ultimately, racing or driving in the rain is trying to find the grip in the corner and understanding that you may have to drive a longer distance than you normally would to find that grip, and balancing that longer distance traveled, the rain line, with the shorter distance traveled but not going as fast, the racing line. Where it works, where it doesn't, that's where the special sauce is in racing in the rain, and that's what separates the truly good rain drivers is the folks that can understand why they want to drive in certain areas and understand what that feels like and how to interact with the information the car is giving them at a moment's notice, and being able to adjust and adapt and improvise their line based on that information they're getting in real time. So that's a very, very long-winded introduction to kind of explain about racing in the rain and driving in wet conditions and how it differs from dry conditions. Is there any question about vehicle dynamics in the rain, something that I said that doesn't make sense, that you want to discuss real quick? Because it's kind of the foundation we're building on before we even start doing the track walk. If you don't understand the concept of a wet line being different than a dry line, we need to get that first before you can get understanding the line I'm about to show you at Silverstone in the wet.
Chris, I have a question. So
Yeah.
when you're preparing for a wet race, would you recommend learning the dry line first and then practicing in the wet?
Absolutely. Because the dry line is going to demonstrate and tell you where the low grip areas are when the track gets wet, and to understand where you're going to start to lose grip. If you don't know what the dry line is on the track, the racing line, it's a new track to you, then you're going to go through corners, and then all of a sudden you'll be halfway through the corner, and then the car is just going to lose all grip, and you're just going to either understeer out or oversteer and spin it randomly in a corner, and you're going to wonder, where did all the grip go? I had grip, and then I didn't have anything. Well, you crossed the racing line right there at that point, and that's why you lost grip. So yes, you need to have a general idea of the racing line first. And then once you understand that, then you can understand as you go through corners where that low grip situation is going to manifest as you're driving in the wet. Great question. Any other questions on that? Okay, hearing none, let's go ahead and start with the track walk. Like I said, moderate track condition or moderately wet track conditions. It's pretty darn wet, frankly. This is probably the wettest you'll see in iRacing, outside of a week 13 weirdness. I haven't really seen conditions like this in official races worse than these types of conditions. So I don't think we may not actually get conditions this bad in the race itself. So this is kind of a worst case scenario. If it gets dry, if it's drier, it's not as wet as this in the race, you can probably take more of a racing line, but I'll kind of describe what I'm going through here as I drive it. So Silverstone, one of the things we want to do also that I didn't really mention in the rain is we want to maintain our momentum. It's difficult to get momentum back in the rain because it's difficult to put power down onto the track. There's less grip. Getting to full throttle is kind of a no-no, or you have to be very delicate with it because you can get in trouble if you just mash the throttle like you would in the dry. There's just no grip. So every mile an hour you scrub in a corner is a mile an hour you have to get back coming out of the corner. And if you can maintain or keep that speed or up your min speed as much as you can, so minimize your speed loss in the middle of a corner, that's less speed you have to gain coming out of the corner, which means throttle. So understand that what we want to do is when we're turning the car, we don't really want to use the pedals if we can avoid it. That's the general idea. We want to use all of the tires grip for turning when we're turning, We want all of the tires grip for braking when we're braking, all of the tires grip for accelerating when we're accelerating. The same rings true in the dry, but there's more grip that a tire can give. So you can do both in the dry. You can trail brake into corners. You can accelerate with steering angle because there's more grip that the tires can give you. So they can kind of do both. In the rain, your traction circle goes from a circle to kind of like this oblong shape where you've got grip and for braking, you got grip for accelerating in a straight line. But as soon as you start turning the car and doing both, you have very little grip. And then you get actually a decent amount of grip when turning if that's all you're doing and asking the tires just to do one thing. So we want the car just to kind of focus on one thing at a time. We can obviously do some clipping with some brake and turning and trail braking and stuff, but it's not nearly going to be as much as when we're in the dry. So coming out of the last corner at Silverstone, we're coming up to the very first corner, which right out of the gate in the rain is treacherous, to say the least. This is one of the corners on the track that is, you have to drive the line, the racing line. It's fast. It's in the dry, you're almost flat out, maybe just a lift or a brush of the brake just to get the nose tucked in to get down to the apex, but then you're right back on throttle. You're going like 130 miles an hour through this corner in the dry. Not so much in the rain, but we don't really have an option for a dry or a wet line because this is one of those cases that if you drive a traditional wet line through here, it is going to be so slow. You're going to have to basically stop the car based on the way this corner is shaped. So the most efficient way to do it is slow the car down, but understand that you are going to lose grip when you get to the racing line at apex, and managing that loss of grip. Managing yourself through that loss of grip to where you gain the grip on the backside when you get out of that grip loss scenario, and then catching it on the back end. So you're throwing the car in, understanding you're going to understeer and lose grip at the apex, but you're on a trajectory and you have the speed that it's okay because the car will grip up once it crosses that. So coming on the way in, we're going to brake. We're going to start braking at, say, the 100 board or just before the 100 board. We're moving over a little bit because we have a puddle on the left side by the curbing. Anytime you see anything shiny on a track in wet conditions, you want to avoid it at all costs. Shiny means standing water. Standing water means hydroplaning. We don't want that. So see shininess like this, avoid it. So we're going to displace our entry into the corner by just enough to where we're not running through this puddle. But we want to still keep a wide angle because we still want to open this corner up as much as possible. So we're avoiding the puddle on the way in. We turn in what may be considered a little bit early because we understand that at the apex, we're going to lose grip. Look at all the shininess on the inside or right here on the curbing. That's a puddle. That's standing water. As soon as we hit it with our front tires, because that's what's going to get there first, the front tires are going to lose grip. What happens when the front loses grip? You understeer. The front wheels are turning, but they're not going to. They have no grip, so they're just going to plow forward. So we're going to enter an understeer situation right at the apex. Once the front tires leave that lack of grip scenario, they're going to grip up on the back end and they're going to start turning, which leads to a potential oversteer situation after we've crossed the puddle. So be ready for the car to rotate after the apex here, but we can use that to our advantage if we are prepared for the rotation. And if we're prepared for the rotation, we can open our hands to catch the car and basically just have a little bit of a slide, but a controlled kind of drift on the exit into the more grip scenario. So as we're turning in, we're looking at the apex on this particular corner. We can put our right side tires on the paint because they're our unloaded tire. In the rain, you want to avoid painted surfaces as best as you can because they tend to be very slick, but specifically you want to avoid them on a loaded tire. So in this case, our left side tires are loaded. Our right side tires are kind of just along for the ride. So it's okay to get on the curbing right here because our loaded tires are not on a painted surface. We'll talk about other areas on the painted surface that you still want to avoid, but in this case, you can take a little bit of the curbing in the rain and it's okay. So right here, we have no grip, so the car is understeering and pushing out to the outside. You notice that my pedals are I'm very controlled and very cognizant of what I'm doing with my feet. Everything is slow movements. Nothing is erratic. Nothing is slamming on the gas, slamming on the brake. I'm not turning the steering wheel hard or fast. Everything is slowed down because I don't want to upset the balance of the car. On the exit right here, the car has gripped up so I can get back on full power. I've got a good trajectory. And if I do it right, it'll put the car basically where a normal track out position would be for this corner in the dry. But I'm not getting all the way over to the curbing, so I'm not touching the paint. So in short, in summary, turn 1 is basically on line. You're braking a little bit earlier than you normally would. You're slowing the car down more than you would in the dry. And you're preparing for this loss of grip right here that you eventually will catch once you cross over that puddle. Turn 2, this left-hander, normally in the dry is flat. In the rain, it's not. We don't have the grip in the car, so we have to do a pretty substantial lift. As you can see here, I'm almost completely out of the throttle on my first entry into this left-hander. And then through here, I'm just managing the car. The car wants to push out and wants to understeer off into the weeds. So when it starts to kind of push and we realize we may not keep it on the track, we just lift the throttle, but just barely. Just a little bit of a throttle lift will get that front end to tuck in a little bit more. There's a surprising amount of grip through turn 2 that you can have. You almost flat out, but you do have to have a pretty substantial lift on the entry. Where that'll put us is a similar position to the dry, which is somewhere about mid-track. However, unlike the dry, we don't want to get all the way over to the left side. We don't want to get over. You can see some shiny bits over here on the left. We don't want to mess with that. So we want to kind of break in the middle of the track, over here towards maybe the left third of the track, to open up the right-hander through here. These next couple corners are really, really slow. So when the slower you're going, the less risk you have of little grip, so to speak. So if you're going slowly, the car inherently can turn better because you don't have as much speed. You don't have the traction doesn't have to overcome the speed. So the slower you're going, the more traditional line you can take. If you take too much of a rain line on really slow corners, you're traveling a longer distance at slower speed. It tends to be slow. So in these two corners, it's almost a traditional rain line or a dry line through this section. Opening up the corner, turning in. We're going to get down to this curbing down on the inside as best as we can. Don't necessarily want to touch it because you can see there's a little bit of a puddle here, but we can get down close to the puddle. We can apex the puddle, stay in the dry, keep the loaded tires in as dry or as grippy a area as possible. Coming through the left-hander of the next slow corner, it's the same thing. This is the typical dry line. We're not all the way at the curbing, but even in the dry, you don't necessarily want to get all the way over there. You're somewhere around this area trying to get the car parallel to the track for your turn-in, and we're going to take a super late apex around this really tight corner that never seems to end. Again, there is a bit of a shiny bit here, a little bit of a puddle, so we don't want to necessarily go through that, but we can apex it and get down pretty close to it with our loaded tires being the right side tires. The key part of this left-hander leading onto the straightaway is we don't want to get on this painted surface on the right, on the track out. This painted surface, if we go over there and we dip any tires onto it, that's our loaded tire, and you will notice that the car just goes right. As soon as you touch this curbing under rain conditions, the car is it feels like somebody's grabbing your steering wheel and yanking it to the right. The reason is your right side tires have no grip, your left side tires have grip, you get on throttle, the grippy part of the car is accelerating, the side that has no grip isn't, and the car yaws towards the spot where there's no grip. So that's why it feels like the car is yanking over to the right to the area of no grip. It's because the grip is on the left side of the car relative to the right. So avoid the curbing at all cost here, but we still need to open up this corner through this left-hander. It's similar to turn 1 where you gotta you gotta carry speed through here, but you also have a low grip racing line that we have to contend with as well. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying not to take, it's not a complete dry line that I'm on my way in here, but it's pretty close. My goal is a late apex, super, super late apex. So where I normally would turn in maybe right around here to get down to the apex in the dry, I'm going to delay that a little bit, lift because I can't take it flat like I normally would, lift a little bit, and then I am super late apexing. So the dry line would be here. So like I'd say the outside of the dry line would probably be in the middle of my car right here, for this particular corner. It's fine to be like this and have my left side tires on the dry line where there's less grip, because they're not the loaded tire. My loaded tires are these outside tires. My outside tires are off the racing line just a little bit, by half a car width. And I can do that because this is where the grip is. It has to be later, because if I turned in earlier, I'd be on the dry line with less grip. So I've delayed my turn in. I'm on a surface of the track that wouldn't be normally considered for the dry line. So there's more grip here. And then I'm taking a later apex to offset it. I will cross the dry line again right here. So I'm going to lose a little bit of grip. So the car tends to push out a little bit. And then we try to do everything we can to avoid getting up on this curb. I did on this particular lap. But if you get on the curb, you just kind of got to make sure your steering is straight and be ready to get out of the throttle should the car start to rotate in a way you don't want it to. Any questions to the first sector, I guess, for Silverstone? I'm throwing a lot at you guys real quick. This is a tough track in the dry, and then you throw rain on top of it, and it gets really tough. No questions on anything. Let me just make sure Discord, or you guys. So far, so good? Okay. Cool. You guys on Twitch, somebody said no sound on Twitch, Chris. Is that still the case? You guys can't hear me, or? Let me just make sure.
We can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me on Twitch? Okay.
Oh, sorry. No, I'm in Discord.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Can you guys hear me on Twitch? I'm just asking over there. Still nothing. Huh. All right. Well, maybe check your volume, because I'm showing on my OBS. Oh, you're listening on Discord. Okay. Well, we'll keep it. I'm showing sound. Okay, you can. I've got people that can hear. Perfect. Okay, just want to make sure everybody can hear. Okay, so now we're on the straightaway. While we're on the straightaway, we still want to be looking for puddles. Puddles can still form in general on straightaways if it gets severe enough, if the rain gets severe enough, and we don't want to drive through them. There's been plenty of times where people going in a straight line hit a puddle because they're too wide with someone, or they're following somebody and they can't see it, and they hit a puddle and they're not ready for it, and then all of a sudden they lose control and just spin out on a straight. It can happen. It's not that big of an issue at Silverstone because, like I said, it's a newer track where the surface is newer. Silverstone's an old track, but the surface is newer. So there's not those low-lying pockets on the track that can collect moisture. So you're pretty safe in a straight line, but just always be aware that look for the shiny spots and avoid them. Coming into this left-hander, the traditional line would be braking somewhere probably about the 100 or 50, probably 50, close to the 50 board, and getting a nice late apex all the way in. We're going to do something similar. There's a lot of grip. Notice there's no shininess on the right side of the track or anything, so we can actually brake on line pretty confidently. So I'm braking about the 100 board. Yeah, so about the 100 board. Braking, it's not a full-on brake, emergency stop type situation, but it's a pretty hefty pedal. I'd say about a 6 or a 7 pedal in this brake zone. And then what I am doing is I am exaggerating the late apex. So normally I'd start tucking it in to the left here, get off the throttle and kind of ride the inside and keep my momentum up. In the rain, I can't do that because you can see some shiny bits here where the racing line would normally be. We don't want to be on those. So I need to delay my turn in for later. So I am crossing the dry line right now and going deep to where we're what would be the wet line. So we're going deep to where there's more grip to get the car to turn, and then taking a super exaggerated late apex into this corner. So you can see I'm way out to the right. Normally you would be down here. I'm diamonding the corner, so I'm getting my turning done right here. I start to pick up throttle, but the car is dancing. I mean, you can see the back end is moving around. Ultimately, it's a very, very late apex. I can get a little bit up on this curb. It's okay because, again, the left side tires are unloaded. And then I am ready to catch the understeer situation or the loss of grip when I cross the the dry line on the exit, but I'm mostly going straight, so it's not that big of an issue. Another thing I want to show through this corner, through this late thing, look at what my pedals are doing. So I have a lot of brake. I start getting out of the brake, and now I am got a little bit of throttle just to kind of modulate and then get a little bit of rotation in the car. But I'm off of it, touch of brake, coasting, tiny bit of throttle, a little more throttle, off the throttle, a little bit more throttle on the way through. I'm constantly messing with the pedals to steer the car. The steering wheel does do the initial steering of the car, but after that, it's all your pedals. Get out of the throttle to take a narrower line, add throttle to understeer out and take a wider line. Your brake can be used if you need to adjust it more severely, but ultimately you're just trying to balance that car on a knife's edge in the rain through there. The hairpin for the right side will end up somewhere right here, so we won't be all the way to the right because we don't want to flirt with this paint. But what we can do is we can break about a car width off the rumble strip, turn it in, and on this particular corner, you would normally say, okay, the rain line, you should drive it in super deep, right, and drive it around the outside of the corner. That's where the most grip is going to be. And I 100% agree. That's where the most grip on this particular corner is. However, the distance traveled on the outside doesn't make up or hurts you more than the grip you would gain by driving out there. So it's much quicker in these conditions just to deal with the low grip scenario on the inside. Avoid the big puddle that's on the inside here, of course. Don't drive through that. But keep it relatively tight. Keep it tidy. Treat it like a carousel. Ultimately, we want to try to finish our apex somewhere on the back end, like the back fourth of the corner. But we're displacing this whole corner by about a half a car width because of this puddle that forms on the inside, to get to a good acceleration point where when we accelerate, we're accelerating and not getting on the paint on the exit. So let me show what that looks like again, coming through the left-hander. So the left-hander is late. We're dancing the car a little bit. The goal is to apex after these little orange things, as you can see. So super late apex. Keep the car tight. We don't want to run all the way deep because we need to turn the car right. We turn it in. We displace the apex point on this carousel to avoid the puddle on the inside. Ultimately, we tuck the car in around the last fourth of the corner, accelerate out, catching the slide in such a way that it puts us not on the paint. The normal dry line here, you would be putting two wheels over here, and sometimes even two wheels over on the green side to maximize the radius of the corner to get a good run coming out of it. You touch this paint and the car is going to jerk left and potentially put you in the grass if you stay on the throttle. This right-hander here, you need to make sure you have a good line. It is flat. We're going to apex it like a sweeping corner, but we're not going to get on the paint. In the dry, you would cut this corner as much as you can. In the wet, no paint. So get close to it, get down to it, but don't get on it. If you do it right and you have a really, really good line, you can take it 100% flat, no issues whatsoever through it. If you don't have a good line through there, or you kind of get a little lazy with it, you can easily run out of room on the exit, put two on the rumble here, and I personally, when I was practicing, did that a couple times, touched these puddles here and just absolutely spun it and lost it, hit the wall on the right side. So stay off these rumbles all through this section. All right, coming up to, I always forget the name of this corner. What is it? Somebody knows it, right?
Cops, I think.
Cops? Yes, Cops. Super fast right-hander. Formula One car, it's flat out. These cars, it's not flat out in the dry. But in the wet, we are taking the dry line. It's very similar to turn one. Same kind of concept. We can't really avoid the dry line through the section. So that means that we're going to, at the apex, have almost no grip. The only way we can counter that is we want to basically have the car turning more when we get to the apex point, and we have to delay our throttle at apex where we have no grip So the car keeps turning at a slower speed and comes out the back end, what we would normally consider to pinching off the exit of the corner and not tracking out. But because of the loss of grip at the apex, the car is going to just push out naturally, and it will put us online on the exit. So it always feels way too slow at the apex here, but it has to be, because you go any faster, when you hit that understeer, it's just going to push the car out and you're going to end up in the weeds on the exit. So much like the dry line, we're going to brake. The dry line, you're braking closer to the 50. In the wet, about the 100. Little bit of a brake. It's about a 4 to 5 pedal. We're just trying to scrub a little bit of speed. We're not trying to stand the car on its nose. A little bit of trail on the way in, and then I'm in 4th gear through here. We want to apex as late as we possibly can, so around somewhere around the second orange marker here, and then pick up throttle. So normally we would be apexing somewhere probably around the first orange marker in the dry, but there's grip to enable us to do that. In the wet, we can't really do that. We have to delay a little bit more. The car has to be going a little bit slower. Get into throttle in 4th. I think I'm in 4th gear. We'll check in a second. And if you do it right, you'll end up tracked out in the good spot that's not getting up on these curbings. If you get out here on this curbing, you have no choice but just get out of the throttle and slowly bring the car back on to where you get grip. But you probably won't get grip until close to the gravel down here at the end of the rumble. That's how bad it is if you touch this. So don't touch this. Coming up to Maggots and Beckett's, this is something that I learned while I was practicing here with Mike McKinney, and we were looking at some data. I learned that it seems the fastest way in the wet for Maggots and Beckett's is attacking it. Go super fast and super deep on the entry. Normally, I would never say do that. I would say, we're setting up everything for the eventual hanger straight. So that's where we need to focus, is the hanger straight. But it turns out if you drive it in deep, the grip on the track is past the dry line. And so we're driving it too deep to get to the area of more grip. So it's a little bit of an inverse idea of what we would normally do. So what I'm thinking here is I am going to just send this car in, and I am going to brake after this first apex, which is on this curb, in a straight line between the two curbings. So you have curbing 1, curbing 2. There's a straight line between them. That's my brake zone. And then I am going to turn in, drive it in deep, end up all the way at track left at the exit of the right-hander, and that's where the grip is. So it looks like this. So I'm driving in, I'm full throttle, full throttle, full throttle, boom. That's where I get on the brakes. Look at the straight line between the two curbings. It'll be just about a 5 to 6 pedal in terms of brake force. Off the brakes, turn it in, try to get to a late apex as late as I can without getting up on this curbing too much. So we want to apex, or try to apex on the back end of the second orange marker. And then we're just kind of hanging on and rolling the car all the way to the edge out here. So in the dry line, I tend to be somewhere about mid-track to set up this left-hander better. In the wet, this is where the grip seems to be. I seem to have more grip, not to mention I carried more speed into the corner. At this point, we're kind of offline. The dry line tends to be a little bit more to the right, which means it gives us a little bit of grip, or more grip than we normally would have on the entry. So we can actually take this pretty quick on the inside. Our unloaded tires can get up on the curb. That's not a big deal. But at some point from that angle, we're going to end up crossing this dry line, and we're going to end up where I would consider, if this was a dry line, a terrible place. But that's fine because we want the grip. So at this point, that's that little oversteer that you see me in the car right here. See that oversteer that was right there? That's me crossing the wet line. That's me crossing the dry line in the wet. I am now off the dry line, because the dry line would be somewhere potentially a little bit left of my car. But that's fine because we're in the wet. We want the grip. So we're turning in super shallow. We're going to cross the dry line right here. So we have to be patient. We're now on the wet line again out here. And we grip back up, and we can get a good run coming out. So through this whole Maggots and Beckett's process, we're crossing the dry line over and over and over again but we just need to understand that that's okay. It have to happen. So we're actually dry line through here, brake, still on the dry line. We are now off the dry line. We're on the wet line, crossing through here, wet, wet, wet. We're going to enter into the dry line right here. We're on the dry line, no grip. Now we have grip again, wet line, wet line, wet line. We're on the dry line here again, so lost of grip. We're waiting on the grip to come back. Now we're on the wet line again, wet, 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 and we're accelerating out on the wet line. So that's how it kind of looks like when you're going through a complex like that. You're crossing the dry line constantly over and over. You just know that because you know what the dry line is. You know where the areas of less grip are in the track and in the car, and how you want to position your car when you go over those areas of low grip is crucial in the rain to get speed out of the car. All right, coming into this right-hander, we want to send this car in much like the left-hander before the hairpin. Same thing. We want to go in super deep. We want to get off the dry line, which would be way deep. So the dry line would be much shallower here at this point. We're going in way deeper than we normally would. We're going to turn the car, so we're diamonding the corner over here. So we're basically taking the corner way out early and in front with the idea of taking a super late apex. We can start picking up throttle as the car has done its rotation already, and we have a relatively straight line coming out of the corner. We have very little steering angle in the car. We can be on full throttle as we're coming out of the corner. The car is going to try to dance as we cross the dry line on the exit. So you can actually see the back end of the car right here is starting to oversteer because I'm crossing the dry line. Not a big deal because I don't have a whole lot of steering angle in the car. Coming up to the final section of the lap, we're going to brake. At this point, these last two corners, we're trying to just avoid the puddles. You can see they're everywhere. So we're braking just off the normal line, just a little bit inside. But this whole section is pretty low speed, so we can take a traditional line through here, the shortest line effectively, which is the dry line. So this is very similar to the dry line. Same thing here, early apex at these curbings. It's dry line. We will cross a little bit of a puddle, but it's no big deal. This final two sets of corners are just one. It's just one consistent corner. The goal is to apex on the traditional spot, and then on the exit through the final corner, we want to avoid getting up on this curbing. So, like I said, this right-hander here through here, if you look at my steering angle, look how little I'm actually moving my steering once I commit to an angle. So I've turned in, and then right here, I kind of just hold this angle right here all the way through. I'm moving it a little bit because I'm fighting grip in the car, but overall it's about 45 degrees all the way through. It's just a constant angle. It's like one corner that you double apex. And that's a lap. All right, so I threw that at you guys pretty quick because it is it's a decently long lap, and I wanted to make sure I got through it, but I'm sure you guys have questions. I'll also show what it looks like from the cockpit without me starting and stopping here in a second, but I just wanted to, if anybody wants to go over any specific corner in detail or have any questions, now's the time.
Could you go back to 13, Stowe? I missed the break point for that.
Which one is Stowe? Is it here? Or is it before that?
I think this is it.
This is it? Okay. Breakpoint for Stowe is going to be about the 100 board. Notice the trend just a little bit before the 100 board. So about 125 if there was a 125 board. Boom, right here. All the big break zones are pretty much the 100 board or just before the 100 board. Any other questions?
Chris, for cops,
Yes.
I think it's important to point out that
Yes.
don't get your wheels on this curving on the left. That is instant death the minute you touch your brake.
Yes. You want to get up as close as you can to it. You don't want to touch it. You touch this, it's your loaded tire on your turn in. You're done. You're going for a ride. You're going to look like Zhao did.
Try it in practice. You'll find out. And the one thing I also found, Chris, for the last corner,
Yep.
I seem to yeah, here, if also I try to, sometimes I'm running a little wide here and I get on that curving and then somehow the car doesn't want to seem to turn at all.
Yeah, avoid this curb because this is painted surface, so less grip in general because of the paint, and your tires are loaded over here. So if you get any kind of tire on this curbing and you're trying to turn the car, the left side tires are going to say no, we don't have any grip, and you're just going to understeer, and you're going to end up worst case or best case scenario, you don't get the car to turn, and so you totally miss this final corner. You eventually get it to turn because you slow the car enough to where there's enough grip. But worst case scenario, you stay out here and you just keep understeering out and you're like off the track, and it's just the corners really you lose 2 seconds.
It's not trying to kill you, but it's definitely killing your left.
Yeah, don't. There's no reason you need to get on that curb. Stay off the curb.
So, a little bit back for the left rider. What do you use as the marker here for turning?
For turn in, I don't really have a marker, but let's see if we can figure out what my marker is. I want to say the end of the curbing or just before the end of the curbing. So I'm turning in just pretty much at the 50 board is my turning, but my eyes are up here. I'm turning in based on what the sight picture shows me as I'm driving, and I'm looking over here. So I don't really have a specific spot on the track that says turn in here. I am saying this looks like I should be turning here, so I turn there. So my eyes are up looking over here. But if you're a driver that goes point to point and that needs a marker or wants a marker, 50 board's a pretty good marker. In general, if you want just a rule of thumb in the rain that is safe, late apex, late everything is better than early in general. So like if you want something here that says, okay, I want to make sure that I'm being safe, go deeper than you normally would. There's more grip out here because nobody drives on it. So that's where all the grip's going to be. So if you have to drive it deep, I don't want to say park the car, but that's what you're doing is you're parking the car, getting the car rotated, and then accelerating out and accelerate through there. Think of it, for those of you that do HPDE with PCA, the PCA line, right? Brake in a straight line, turn the car with no pedals, accelerate in a straight line. That's what rain driving is in a nutshell. And then there's obviously little bits of gray in there where you start to bleed the two together to go faster. But in general, rain driving is you just want the car to really just do one thing really well as opposed to two things terribly. So, great questions. Any other questions? All right, let's see what it looks like in the cockpit. I'm going to turn the volume down because it tends to get loud. Okay, so coming through the last corner. We're going to brake just before the 100 board. We're going to tuck it in a little bit later than normal, off the pedals, pick up the oversteer, accelerate out, a little bit of a crack of the throttle, then back on the throttle, brake across the track, downshift down to second gear, first gear, nice smooth throttle input, second gear through here, really late apex. It takes forever to get the car to rotate. Stay off the curb on the right. Delay the turn in. Late apex. Get a run out. Avoid the curb if you can. I touched it just a touch, and even then I had to fight it. We're going to brake at about the 100 board. Late apex. So we're going to go deep, deep, deep. Wait. Pick up the throttle on the exit. Displace the apex through here by the puddle. We're avoiding the puddle. Diamond the corner. Get a good runoff. Catch the oversteer as it comes out. Have a really good line through the right-hander here. We can be flat. Don't touch the curb. Don't touch the curb on the exit. We're going to brake before the 100 board. Downshift to fourth gear, I believe. Yep, fourth gear. Late apex. Wait. Get on the throttle, understanding that the car is going to understeer all the way through the exit, so we need to allow for that. All right, send it into the first part of Maggots and Beckett. So brake really deep, let the car run. It'll grip up right here. Turn in early to stay off the racing line. Turn in early to stay off the racing line. Car's gonna cross the racing line, accelerate out where the grip's at, and get a good run down the hanger straight. Breathe a little bit. It's been a hectic lap already. Look around us. Be looking for our brake marker, which is gonna be about the 125. Late. We're going to let it go deep. Let the car rotate and then accelerate coming out. Catch the slide on the exit. Brake before the 100 board here. Very traditional line. Apex it like I normally would apex it. And then basically one corner with double apex through here, keeping the steering angle very similar, using the throttle to steer the car. And there you go. There's a lap of Silverstone in moderately wet conditions. It was my particular lap was a 17.9. Felt pretty quick for me on that. So your mileage may vary, but again, it's so heavily dependent on the conditions. If it rains more, the lap times could easily be in the 220s. If it rains less, the lap times could be like 213s, 214s. It just depends on the conditions on race day. So practice. I would say it's always easier to practice in more wet weather and then have it be drier because you have more grip. So it's always easier to go to more grip than to practice with more grip and then the race have less grip. I think it's more difficult to go that way. So I would advise trying it in too wet conditions or conditions that you think are going to be wetter than the actual race. Learn that, and once you get that, if you race in drier conditions, it's going to be much easier to adapt. All right. Any questions about it, or you want to look at any laps or anything else from the cockpit? Still got about 8 minutes or so. Anything about rain in general, or if you're in pro or club, how to set the car up, if you have a question about that.
What kind of traction control are you running?
I'm running pretty heavily, so in this particular lap I was running 8. So 8 on the traction control and also 8 on the ABS. If you're running a fixed setup, you can't change it. If you're running this open setup, you can modify your TC and ABS, and I suggest using it. I mean, that's why they're there in the real car, is to enable the drivers to dial it up in the wet. So it's there, use it.
Risky.
Joachim, go ahead.
What brake bias did you have?
In this particular laps, I had brake bias down to negative 1.84. In general, there's a lot of people like to run more brake bias in the wet because what you'll notice is as you're entering in corners, you're getting on the dry line earlier. The front tires are the first things to get on the dry line, and which inherently has less grip. So you're going to get understeer in the car first before you get oversteer. And so if you have more rearward brake bias, you're trying to induce oversteer or rotation in the car where normally you would get understeer. So folks tend to run more rearward brake bias to try to offset some of that understeer that you're getting because of the less grip from the front tires. Just understand that on your way out of the corner, brake bias isn't going to do anything. And if you have too much rotation on entry and then you hit that oversteer situation when you come out and the front tires do grip up when you come off the dry line, you could easily spin it because you have too much rotation already in the car. So in other words, you've compensated for the understeer in the beginning of the corner, you've rotated it, and then you're not expecting the oversteer that's coming in the back half of the corner, and sometimes you can't catch it. So play with it, but in general, it helps get that rotation earlier in the corner to get the car pointed in the right direction so you can try to get on throttle sooner and straighten up your steering. And that's kind of the idea of running more rearward bias.
Hey, Chris, any thoughts on running with limited visibility?
Yes. Do not stare at the car in front of you. You can't see. It's difficult to see in a pack in the rain with the rooster tails and everything. I mean, if we go to the chase camera here and I back up to the race and I put the car where maybe you would be if you were following me, that's your vision, right? This is what you're seeing. You see the rain light, you see my brake lights, that's about it, right? And then if you get even closer, like if you're fighting me, it's even worse, right? So how do you avoid this? Well, you need to be comfortable with looking out here to the edges around the car where there's no spray to see clues of where you're going to need to brake. So if we go down into the first heavy brake zone at the end of the straightaway here, right? So huge rooster tails and everything. I know that when I cross a bridge, the brake zone is going to be shortly thereafter. I know when I cross this flag stand, I'm getting darn close. I know that there's going to be a sign and I'm braking after the first sign. So I am looking at all these other items instead of the specific marker. If you rely on one marker as your brake point instead of like a zone, you're going to have trouble in the rain, especially following somebody, because sometimes you can't see the marker. So you need to have other secondary markers that help tell you this is where I need to brake, so you don't go into the guy in front of you. Also, if you're following somebody in the rain closely and they've got the spray going and everything, be aware that you haven't followed them for a lap yet, they may brake way earlier than you're expecting, and be prepared for it, because if you drive into the back of them because they broke early, it's on you. You're the one that hit them in the rear. So a lot of times if I'm following somebody really close in the rain, or I'm racing somebody in the rain like this, I will lift way early. I will lift like here. This is not my brake point at the 150, but I will lift here, let a gap form between me and the car, and then use that gap, or use the car in front of me to gauge my braking and bring the gap back down slowly. You don't want to be 2 inches off the car in front of you in the rain and try to threshold brake, because if you miss your brake point or you hit a puddle that you didn't see, that you weren't expecting, you're just going to go right into the back of them. So be careful with that. But great question on the visibility. It's tough. I thought there
Chris,
was
on traction control?
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead on traction control.
Traction control, I didn't really see how much you were engaging in relying or trying to avoid with both traction and ABS. But I see you're doing, it looks like fairly normal but light trail braking. Any hints on those three?
Yeah, so you don't want to use full, like if I just play here and you look at the lights, this is a really low traction area. So let's see. So I'm in ABS right here. I'm seeing the lights, all the wheel lights are showing up. So I'm in a little bit of ABS here. I have traction control here at apex, and I'm using that. I'm on throttle and letting the traction control figure it out. I'm turning in here. I have grip, no traction control. A little bit of lockup on the left side tire, a little bit of ABS blink, more ABS, 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 or not ABS, traction control. So I am using it. I'm leaning on the laps, or on the aids in the car. So if I show it full speed, it'll help. So these are little lockups, right? This is ABS helping the colors. White is traction control. So I'm leaning on them a little bit. I wouldn't say that I'm just like ignoring them and just being flat-footed through them, but I am using them as a assistant. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to get as close to using ABS and traction control as possible without, like, if you're in it, let's say, let me back it up. If you're in a cup car, you don't want to get to the point where you lock up the wheels or you lose traction because you went over the edge. You're going right up to the threshold, but going across the threshold is a no-go in a car without ABS or traction control. You don't want to be there, right? So you leave a little bit of chicken on the bone. You leave a little bit of room for error on the safe side of traction of grip. So you're not going all the way to lock up. You're not going all the way to stepping over to loss of traction in those cars. In the GT3, because you have ABS and you have traction control, you can kind of flip that idea. So you can go closer to threshold, and in fact even dip your toes over the edge of threshold, because the driving aids will prevent a bad situation. So you will go faster the closer you get to ABS, for instance. Well, I will go and I will use ABS as my edge to know that I'm using every inch of grip that I have in the tire. And if I nibble the ABS, that's totally fine, because it's not gonna hurt my times. What you don't want to do is you don't want to just be an ape and slam the brake as hard as you can and be on 100% ABS, turn the wheel and smash the throttle and be on 100% traction control, because that's not fast. The aids are going to slow you down more than help you. They're there to try to keep you from spinning out at that point and not go fast. So tickling them, getting up to their edge, and then letting them help you and figuring out where that edge is, totally fine. And that's how I drive it. Using them and leaning on them 100% and helping them or asking them to basically figure out how to turn the car, that's slow, and you don't want to do that. Hope that makes sense.
Thanks.
Yep.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Passing here in the rain.
Oh God, wherever you can find it. Passing rules kind of go out the window in the rain because it's so tough. I would say all the traditional passing areas are great passing zones in general. But in the rain, what I would suggest is that look for opportunities where you are going to force your opponent to be on line. So on the racing line, because that's where there's no grip. So like, for instance, coming up to this corner, right? If your opponent goes to defend because they don't want you taking the inside, that's fine. If that's the case, if the car I'm tracing dips into the inside to protect, I'm just going to send it deep online, deep into the braking zone here, because all the grip is on the outside of the corner. So he's going to be, or she is going to be struggling with grip on the inside online because there's no grip there. And I'm going to be able to carry more speed around the outside, and I will be able to get by them no problem. So in the rain, if you can get your opponent to be on the racing line, they're going to be slower. And that's going to be advantageous to you because you're going to be off the racing line and thus on the grippy spots and be able to go faster. But other than that, all the traditional braking point or all the traditional places to pass at Silverstone apply. I'll run through them real quick. Turn one is kind of a no-no. There's nowhere to go. There's only one line through here. That's why we drive the dry line in the wet, is because there is no other line. If you get a good run through one on somebody, you can send it down the inside here into turn 3, and this is where there's grip. There's tons of grip all in here because this is not the racing line. So if your opponent takes a traditional line and you got to run on them and you're right on their bumper, you can pop out and outbrake them going into this corner, no problem. This is a good passing zone here. This spot right here is probably the most dangerous place to pass, just because every car, the line is super wide all the way in, and if you dive in here and your opponent's not expecting it, they turn in, you're shallow, and you're gonna hit them in the rear as they're in the side of their car basically as they come through. So I would avoid trying to pass somebody in turn 4, just because the 2 reasons. They may not know that you're trying to do it because their mirror, they're not going to see you make the move because the way the angle work, they look in their mirror, they're not going to see you. And so they'll turn down and you'll hit them. And it'll be on you from a penalty standpoint. 2, even if you're successful going through here and diving somebody, you're going to be slow coming out and you're on one of the longest straights of the track. So you're going to be slow relative to everybody else on track. So it's just not an advisable place to pass. As I said before, turn whatever this one is, this is a great place to pass. The track's so wide, there's so many lines through here, and in the rain, you can take even more alternate lines and get great runs. Depending on how your opponent went through that corner, this can also be a passing zone, so long as you have the inside. I don't think I've ever seen a car hold the outside on someone that legitimately knew what they were doing. So inside wins here, so it's difficult to pass. The very fast right-hander here is a no pass. Do not try to. It's like turn 1. There's only one line through here. You can get a run on somebody potentially to try to get up alongside them before Maggots Beckett's, but don't pass through the right-hander itself. Maggots and Beckett's, this is not the best place to pass by any means, but it can be done if you're able to get a really good run or they make a mistake on the previous corner and you get alongside someone, you can play chicken with your opponent and try to outbrake them going into this corner. And especially if you're taking the method of sending it in the rain, because the grip's on the back end of this right-hander, you can make it work, especially if they're braking early. So, but I would only try that with somebody you really know. all this area through this area, this is not really a passing zone, not really a passing zone. And then this right-hander is like that left-hander I was mentioning. This is a great opportunity to make a move on somebody after the long straightaway. You can make a move on somebody going into this left-hander if you're brave and you trust your brakes, and the other guy brakes or gal brakes really early. You can make a pretty good move on the inside here. But the last two corners, unless you're already side by side with someone, you don't want to be side by side. If you're side by side with someone right here, it's not good, because there's not enough room to really go too wide through here. If you do go too wide through the final corner, the outside car is always going to suffer. You're going to get pushed out into the curbing, and there's going to be no grip out there. Or you guys come to blows and hit doors at the apex. It's not a good place to be side by side through these last two corners. So single file through there. So. All right. Any other questions? All right. Hearing none. Well, good luck. Stay dry. I think there's an EDE that's about to go on, so get out there and give it a practice and give it a shot. Don't get frustrated as best as you can. Racing in the rain can be fun, but it can also be incredibly daunting if you're not used to it. But like anything, practice makes perfect. Get comfortable with the car kind of moving around. The nice thing about racing in the rain and on rain tires is the tires are very communicative and will tell you what they're doing. It's easier to catch slides on a wet tire in a wet track than on a dry tire. So get comfortable with the car kind of squirming around. See what it feels like. The more you get comfortable with the car, the back end trying to chat with you and talk with you, the faster you're going to go. And so driving in the rain is a bit of like I said, it's a balance. It's a knife's edge. You're trying to balance something on a point. And if you can get comfortable with balancing something, which is the overall balance of the car, then you're going to get more comfortable driving quickly in the rain. So good luck to you guys. I wish you all the absolute best. Most importantly, survival in the rain. Your competitors are going to make mistakes. Don't be one of those that makes mistakes. Keep your nose clean, and you will finish well in this race, in these week's races. So.
Thanks, Chris. And the good luck sounds a little ominous, though.
Well, yeah, you need luck. Rain is there are truly good drivers that absolutely thrive in these types of conditions. They always tend to rise to the top at the end of the day, and it tends to be the drivers that are very adaptable and can improvise on the fly, are very comfortable with changing conditions, and they're comfortable with being uncomfortable. Drivers that tend to struggle are the ones that like need to practice in the exact conditions that the race will be in, and if there's any deviation, it throws a monkey wrench into how they perform. So adaptability is everything. So practice in varying conditions. If you get fast in the rain, you'll be faster in the dry, just in general. So get comfortable with this. It may be uncomfortable at first, but just get comfortable with it. It'll make you a better driver. But just like anything, there's less grip. Give more room to everybody. Hopefully they give you more room too, because you can't see anything when you're following somebody. But put yourself in good spots that will help you succeed. If you're going 3 wide through turn 1 because you decided to stick it in the middle and make it 3 wide, that's probably not a good recipe for longevity. So be smart about it. You got an hour race. Like I said, people are going to make mistakes. Let your competitors make mistakes. Don't get caught up in it, and you will finish really well at the end of the day.
Hey, Chris, I jumped in late. What's the 10-second Cliff Note setup? Are you running high downforce, or just you don't got to go through the whole thing? But...
No. So we didn't really talk about setup, but in general, the setup for Silverstone has always been high downforce. There's a lot of high load corners. In the rain, you want to make a car softer in general. So think about softer springs, softer roll bars. Basically, you want the car to have as much mechanical grip as it possibly can. And softer in general, the softer the car, the more grip it has. Now, it's going to be less responsive. It's not going to be as direct and pointy and darty, but you don't necessarily want that in the rain either. So you want smooth inputs, softer everything, including the car setup. So that tends to be a pretty good start. And move it from there. At the end of the day, it's what kind of balance do you want in the car? Where do you want it to let go when it lets go? But so much of the car is influenced by the conditions, right? Even if you set up a super understeery car for the rain because you don't like oversteer, if you hit an area with the rear tires of low grip and the front tires have grip, you're going to oversteer anyway. There's nothing you can do to combat it. So I would almost argue that driving style matters more than setup in the rain. And there's things you can do with the setup. Like I said, make it softer for more mechanical grip. But ultimately, how you drive it is going to dictate how the car is going to handle more than the setup itself. So,
Thanks.
yeah. I would not go out there on like a medium downforce or a low downforce setup. Hey, if you can make medium downforce work, all more power to you. I can't do it. I need all the help I can get and all the grip I can get in these conditions. So.
Thanks, Chris.
Yep, no problem. I will
Yeah,
stop
appreciate
it
it.
there.